this morning, former two-term governor Rick Snyder, latest Republican to come out against the president. He says he's voting for Joe Biden. Just a couple of his quotes from that USA Today article. He says he's a bully, lacks a moral compass, ignores the truth. Again, he's the latest Republican. Do you want to respond to Rick Snyder's decision in particular right now?
Well, look, I think the people of Michigan understand what they get with Donald Trump and what they get with Joe Biden. We saw a Biden administration for 8 years. We saw 60,000 manufacturing plants close. We saw 850,000 jobs gone because of his decision to support a horrible trade deal like NAFTA, killed the American middle class and crushed the American worker. We saw 3.5 million jobs leave hardworking Americans and go straight to China with Joe Biden. Donald Trump has a much different tact, and it actually helps people across this country, regardless of race, religion, color, or creed, and that includes the folks in Michigan. I mean, you saw hundreds of thousands, about 700,000, in fact, manufacturing jobs come back into this country. More jobs than there were people to fill them, tax cuts, deregulation, energy exploration like we've never seen before. In fact, we're now a net exporter of energy for the first time in decades. And that's good for our national security, too, because we're no longer beholden to the whims of Middle Eastern countries or Russia or China. We are focused on making sure the American people are protected, safe, and secure. That's what this president has been about his entire tenure, and not what Joe Biden has been about.
Would you like to respond to Rick Snyder specifically?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think the voters of Michigan understand what they get with both of these folks. I'm not going to comment on any one particular person who endorses Joe Biden. The fact is, if you endorse Joe Biden, that's your right to do it. But what you're endorsing is a job-killing Green New Deal. What you're endorsing is defunding the police. What you're endorsing are massive tax hikes, $4 trillion, in fact, on top of the American people. And that's what you're voting for and what you're endorsing with Joe Biden. And with this president, you get the exact opposite. It's peace and prosperity. It's been that way for 4 years. It'll be that way for 4 more.
Commission on Presidential Debates just announced its cycle's moderators. Real quickly, what does the campaign think of the selections?
Not necessarily the moderators we would have chosen, but finally, Joe Biden will get to see the likes of Chris Wallace and others who'll ask him some tough, pointed questions. Of course, if he does show up to the debate at all. I'm fundamentally in the camp, though, of whatever Joe Biden says on that debate stage, if he just walks up to the microphone and is able to complete the sentence, "Hi, my name is Joe," that the media will say, what a great performance. Man, he's brilliant. He understands foreign policy. He understands domestic policy. He's just a great candidate with that one simple phrase, because they're so in the tank for him at this point. And he's been doing this for, half of a century. So we fully expect some good, strong debates if the vice president decides to show up.
Okay. This week, CDC put out some numbers, said 6% of COVID-19 deaths had no underlying conditions. The president said on Fox News to Laura Ingraham that only 6% were actually COVID-19 deaths, and he previously said that 99% of COVID cases were totally harmless. Neither one of those statements are true. So the question is, why does he keep pushing out false information about a virus that is closing in on 200,000 dead Americans?
A couple of things. One is one dead American is too many. This virus came straight from China. It was unforeseen, unprecedented. No one had ever experienced a virus like this. One of the reasons it's called a novel virus is because no one had ever seen anything like it before. So the federal government's response, quite frankly, moving heaven and earth to make sure we had enough PPE, for example, into the state of Michigan and across this country, making sure we had enough ventilators with a historic public-private partnership. Those are things that could not have happened and did not happen, quite frankly, under Joe Biden when they faced multiple pandemics. But the fact is, those CDC numbers were even pulled off of Twitter. And that's very interesting, because we all know Twitter kind of skews against conservative voices and is against free speech. But when the Center for Disease Control puts out the number, about 6%, they still take it down. Now, that should beg a lot of questions out there. But we now know that those people who died, that 6%, they were the ones that only had coronavirus and no underlying conditions. And that's significant for the American people to know.
But the problem is that's not what the president said, though. That's not what the president said. In addition, when he said 99% of cases are totally harmless, that's not true.
He didn't say 99% of the cases are totally harmless. What he was talking about was a majority of those cases, 99% of those, affect adults. It doesn't affect children the same way. We know that. That's what the science says. And he's just repeating what his health experts and medical experts tell him. So the fact is, he's taking control of this with bold, aggressive, decisive action early on when everyone ridiculed it. And now the doctors like Birx, like Dr. Fauci, like Dr. Hahn have all come out and said publicly his decision saved countless lives. And we know Joe Biden wouldn't have done the same thing because he said he wouldn't have.
Okay, I'll go back and I'll look at the quote just to be sure. Two more questions and I'll let you get out if we can get through both of them. This week, the CDC as well sent a letter to governors asking them to waive safety regulations to get vaccine distribution sites ready by November 1st. That's just 2 days before the election. On its face, that does look political. 2 days before the election, seemingly want to get good news about a vaccine right before people vote. Are you able to say otherwise? Why did we pick November 1st for that date?
Well, I work for the campaign. I don't work for the administration. So it's tough for me to have a conversation with you or your viewers about what the CDC is going to do or when they're going to do it. I would note, however, that if you take a look at the Democrat side, Governor Cuomo, for example, he won't release any information about nursing homes, which caused a majority of the deaths in New York and across this country for some time, actually, until after the election. A lot of the things they're talking about on the Democrat side come after the election. So I don't know what prompted that decision. I don't know why they're pushing for that particular date. What I can tell you, when I was at the White House and this president implemented Project Warp Speed, for example, we now see syringes being built and distributed with vials as well. All the mechanisms with which to give a vaccine is working in tandem with all the health experts and all the medical experts that are developing therapeutics and vaccines. So should we come up with one before the end of the year, you won't have to wait to get it. It'll be ready to be administered. That's something that this government has never seen. And all the doctors involved, like Dr. Fauci, made the point that he'd never seen the government move this quickly. He'd never seen these folks move as fast as they have. We want it to be safe. We want it to be effective. And I guarantee you, with the president's leadership, it will be.
Okay, I'll let you tell me if you have time for one more question, if you have to get going, because I'm sure we're up against it right now.
I'm looking at my folks now.
Yep.
We have one more. Okay.
One more? Okay, if you got time. Thank you. President has condemned rioters for burning buildings and violence and whatnot, which Joe Biden did the other day as well. But the president has not criticized in the way that Joe Biden has the fact that armed militias are going into already tense situations in some of these cities, which have led to multiple deaths in just the past few days. So my question is, does the president, does the campaign think that militias, armed militias going into our cities during protests and or riots is a good idea?
The president has addressed this directly. He wants local law enforcement, those brave men and women who protect these cities and America's families every single day, to be the ones to handle these issues. The problem is, as you well know, Democrat-controlled states, Democrat-controlled cities have told the police not to do their job. They can't use lethal force. They can't use non-lethal force. They're told to stand down in many instances and let the cities burn. That's unacceptable. So it would make sense why some people would show up and try and protect their property. I mean, that's only obvious. I mean, you got to protect your home somehow. And on top of the Democrats saying we want to defund the police and not let them do their job, we also want to take away your guns while we're at it too, leaving America's families completely vulnerable. But I want to go back to something you just said. 90 days, death, destruction, riots, looting, assaults on innocent Americans, that went on for 90 days. We saw 4 days of a Democrat convention talking with people from these cities that are all Democrat controlled as well. They didn't mention this at all. In fact, Joe Biden this past weekend called the protests peaceful again. One time he came out of his hidey hole and mentioned the word violence, the media jumped right in with him and say, yes, it's violent. Oh, but it's Donald Trump's fault. What are you, joking? He's absolutely offered federal assets into our cities across this country, and where they've been allowed to come in, the violence has stopped. No one out there breaking all into these storefronts and stealing merchandise, burning churches, tearing up property, destroying automobiles, beating up innocent Americans. Those aren't Trump supporters. Those are Joe Biden supporters, and the media knows it, and so does Joe Biden. So he had to say something about it to try and change the narrative. But there's a reason all these police unions that supported Joe Biden in the past are all now on board with Donald Trump. And it's because he has their back. He's protected them. He's boosted their funding. They need protection because so many in these Democrat cities, Democrat mayors, are blaming police. Joe Biden did the same thing. He said they were inciting violence. That's absolutely ludicrous. And you can't have it both ways. You can't say if the president wants to send in federal assets to protect the American people because you won't, that's fascist. And then when your city burns to the ground, look to the White House and say it's all Donald Trump's fault. That's absolutely insane. So the president has always and will always stand up to protect the American people and American families. It's pretty clear that Joe Biden, who has not condemned Antifa, has not condemned BLM, has not condemned defund the police, is going to do that ever.
And just a quick fact check, he did say that he is against the defund the police movement. Just a quick fact check there.
No, that's not what he said. What he said was, when asked, would you be willing to redirect funding away from police? He said, yes, absolutely. And if you don't think redirect is the same thing as defund, then let me redirect your paycheck into my bank account. Everyone knows it's the same thing. And every single person who spoke at the Democrat convention, let's go past the fact that he had rabid, open anti-Semites speaking throughout the day. He also had people who didn't just say defund the police, they wanted to abolish the police. And because we didn't have an in-person convention, you got to hear the quiet part out loud. All day, you got to go online and watch their speakers. Everyone, one after the other, came out and said things like, if we don't have open borders, this country's going to hell. They said things like, we have to end capitalism. We have to abolish the police. That's the type of mentality they have on the left. Joe Biden's been absolutely corrupted and taken over by the far left radicals in his party. We've seen it time and time again, and now he's embracing all of their ideas that would absolutely destroy this country.